we're now going to have a bit of a look at double tonguing. You may remember what the mechanics of double tonguing are. They are when we say dugga, dugga, dugga. So what's happening is instead of having to tongue ta, 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 ta at the front of our tongue all the time, we swap from front to back. So dugga, dugga, dugga. You can think of it a few ways, dugga, dugga, taka, taka, dugu, there's lots of different ways of thinking about it, but it's all effectively your tongue going back and forward and back, instead of just going because then you can do it much quicker if you're going forward, back, instead of having to retake the front all the time. So let's just practice saying dugga, 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 dugga. And dugga, 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 dugga. For as long as you can. Take a pause, do that a couple of times until it feels quite comfortable just saying dugga, 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 dugga. Okay, now we're going to pretend that we have our flute on our face. We're not going to quite do it yet. We're going to go as if we're blowing into the flute, but not quite. What's happening is that I'm thinking dugga, dugga, and that's what my tongue is doing, it's going dugga, dugga, but I'm not saying anything with my vocal cords, they're going off, because it's as if I'm playing into the flute, and I'm making an embouchure shape with my mouth. So if I put my foot up, it would make a sound. But we're not going to stress ourselves with that just yet. We're just going to... Be really careful, if your lips ever come together, stop and do it again until your lips definitely don't come together. You don't want to go... You just want your lips to stay basically the same the whole time, and it's just your tongue moving. You'll see mine moving a little bit, but they're not coming all the way together. So yeah, have a pause, do that until it feels a little bit more comfortable. Okay, so we've practiced saying dugga dugga on its own, we've practiced doing it as if it's into the flute, and now we're going to do it into the flute. So we're going to pick your favourite note. I'm going to suggest an A, but any note sort of around there also works fine. And we're just going to do what we've done before, but into the flute. So take a breath, go dugga dugga, but without our vocal cords and with an embouchure. What might happen is that it might crack like it did there, or it might go down. So that is because the air isn't quite, you're doing weird things with your air. If you're now getting your back of your tongue involved, it's okay if it doesn't sound exactly right. If you find it's easier to go at that A or whatever note down the octave, that's okay. Just focus on that for now until you can keep one note quite consistent. So just for, a little bit. So say, 8, so a whole half a bar of semiquavers. Just until you can get, say, 5 in a row of that. Again, it's okay if you need to sort of pause if it's not working very well. You can sort of pause now and then come back to this in a little bit. Just really make sure that you can make that dugga dugga into the flute. Again, it's okay if it's quite slow, if it's sort of more dugga dugga, if that's how slow it needs to be in order to get it always clean and always sounding like the note that it's supposed to be, that's okay. I'd also like you to really take note of how long it is and how much air you're using. We don't want to sound like where it sounds very short and staccato. We want it to be fairly legato, so our air just keeps going the whole way. What we're not doing is changing our air to go digga, 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 digga. We're keeping the air flowing as if it's a long note. We just keep going throughout the whole note, and it's just our tongue going dugga, 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 dugga. Yeah? So my air's not changing at all, it's just my tongue going back and forth, creating the duggas. So yeah, take a pause, have that feel good, feel free to come back to the rest of this video, tomorrow or another day, to get that sounding really solid. Okay, hopefully your double tonguing feels a little bit more comfortable now. We're now going to have a look at a piece. It's a double tonguing study. We're not going to have a look at the whole thing. There's also some things that are tricky about it that aren't the double tonguing, such as in that first bar, that leap from the G to the E. That's going to be quite tricky. So even before we start looking at the double tonguing, I'd like you to just practice going between that G, just single tongue the whole thing, if you for simplicity, because this is to get our embouchure going. So tongue the G and then the low E. And then practice getting that a little bit faster. Yeah, practice that, get it not like super fast, but enough so it feels easy to go from that G down to that E. So now let's come back to the piece. If we have a look at the first bar, there's sort of two different aspects to double tonguing that we're using. We have some nice slurs in there, so it's not just bars upon a whole page of double tonguing. There are some nice slurs in there, which makes it a little bit easier for your tongue. But there's tonguing on a single note, so for the first two beats, it's just all on a G, and then for the second beat, you have to coordinate the duggers with your fingers, which is definitely a challenge. So hopefully the first two beats make sense, or are a little bit easier and a little bit more intuitive than the next two beats. So let's just have a talk through those first two beats though. So we start on the E, we slow up to the G, da, and then dugga, dugga, dugga. So da, dugga, dugga, dugga. So we have three sets of dugga because it's for each beat, and we definitely start on a duh because it's for each semiquaver. So this is what it would sound like. Or slower, we want this to sound really solid. Somewhere between those two speeds, I think you will find a happy medium, wherever is comfortable for you. So have a pause, get those first two beats sounding comfortable. Hopefully they will be a little bit easier to sound comfortable because of all the work you've done in the previous parts. So now let's come to the next two beats of that bar. So we have our slur from the A to the G, and then that leap down to the E. It's okay if the E doesn't fully speak. Obviously, eventually you will want it to speak, but when we're just in the early stages of learning it, it's okay if it doesn't quite happen. You just want it to coordinate with your first D. So make sure it really gets down to that D, and then be in a good rhythm. So set up from that first part of the bar, but you may need to take that first part of the bar slower to coordinate this part of the bar more easily. So pick what's a really simple tempo. How really easily can you do those notes on their own in that second part of the bar without the double tonguing, just on their own? What's a really comfortable speed for your fingers? And then think, what's a really comfortable speed for your double tonguing? Dugga, dugga, dugga. Hopefully your fingers can match that tempo. Now let's just start from that E. Again, it's okay if that E doesn't fully speak. Obviously you would like it to speak, but we're focusing on the double tonguing at this particular moment. So we want to think dugga, dugga, dugga. I know that wasn't very in tune, but on the flute it sounds good. So we want to start from the E, dug, to then g, dugga, dugga. Our mouth is doing exactly the same thing as it did in the first half of the bar. It's all da, dugga, 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 and in the second half, da, dugga, dugga, dugga. But the difference is that our fingers have to coordinate with our tongue for this one. So it's okay if it takes a little bit in order to get your tongue to coordinate with your fingers. It also might work perfectly. It really just depends on how you've used bits of your body before, what it's familiar with doing. So maybe it will come really easily, maybe it will be quite tricky. That's totally okay. Yeah, take a minute to sort of process that, figure that out. Then, once that's processed and put together, I'd like you to put together that whole first bar, and then have a look at the rest of the piece. A lot of the, or at least the rest of that first line. With that first line, it's all quite similar. You have some crotchets in there, which is just free of double tonguing in order to let your tongue rest for a minute, or a second. That's same thing. And so you have that going throughout that first line. It's much more simpler. When we get to the second line, our embouchure has to start doing a bit more work to hit from the that F down to that G, or that D down to that G. So again, our tongue is doing the same mechanics. Dia, dagga, 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 dia, dagga, dia, dagga. It's all the dagga daggas going on. But yeah, have a look at, say, the first the first 4 lines, if you can, and just try and get that flowing a little bit easily. But yeah, hopefully that is helpful for double tonguing. Just remember, it's just the front, back, dagga, dagga, or tuku, tuku, or whatever is most easiest for you to think about. And make sure that it's not tuka, tuka, with it all quite staccato. We want nice long dagga, 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 where it's just the air going dagga, 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 nice and legato throughout the flute. So it's still tongues, but the air is as if it's slurred and legato. So hopefully that was helpful, and I will see you next week.